With our emphasis on the upper abdominal region, it's probably not surprising we're going to look at some waist twisting. First of all, we want to define the waist a little bit. Most of the twisting actually happens in the spine above the narrowest portion of the torso. So typically the waist is defined, and it's a somewhat casual term, between the top of the hip bones and the bottom of the rib cage. But in the spine, this corresponds to the middle of the lumbar vertebra. And the lumbar vertebra actually don't twist very much. It feels as if they do, but that's just the soft tissue stretching through that area. The actual range of motion, rotation, comes from the lower thoracic vertebra, where we have those two floating ribs, the ribs that are not fixed in the front. So they allow a lot of range of motion. And in Chinese medicine, that's where two important hollows, the back transport for the stomach and spleen are. Right at the bottom of the thorax, right in between the spaces of those lowest floating ribs. And so the twisting that feels like it happens at the waist is actually happening slightly higher, and it's going to exert a lot of force on those transport points. And transport points or hollows are the ones that connect directly to the organ systems in Chinese medicine. So they're right in the thick part of the spinal muscles, just on either side of the spine, right where the muscle is thickest, and that twisting is really going to activate them very strongly, and so activate the internal systems connected and help regulate them. In terms of our overall posture, if it's comfortable, let's take a little wider stance, wider than hips width, shoulders width, or perhaps slightly wider. And we're going to sit down a little bit deeper into that hip crease, the groin crease. So that means the ankles and knees are both going to bend a little bit more. This alone is going to activate the leg channels more, including the stomach and spleen channels. I'm still trying to drop the base of my spine towards the floor, so I get that posterior pelvic tilt where the front hip bones feel like they're rolling back a little bit as the tailbone rolls under. But I don't want to hold this rigidly. I just want to drop the body into that position. That position may feel like it's sort of gathering the abdomen a little bit. Sort of embraces the abdomen from the back, particularly the lower abdomen. If I want to get that same feeling of gathering into, strengthening and supplementing the upper abdomen, I want to do something with the upper body. Chin still in, crown of the head is floating up. The upper back feels nice and round and full when that happens. Shoulders sink. But if I bring my arms into a rounded position where they feel like they're catching a ball, so before we were catching the ball this way, here it's a bigger ball, like a beach ball. It's sitting in my lap, and my hands are hugging it, but also sort of resting on it. The center of my palms faces to the middle of the upper abdomen again. That hollow on the center line that's associated with the stomach and spleen, particularly the stomach. It's the front gathering point of the stomach, the 12th point on that front center line, conception or Ren vessel. So if I keep my shoulders sinking, keep my elbows dropped, keep nice strong hip flexion so I'm not leaning backward. Feels like I'm sitting back onto a stool, right? Or onto a saddle, like I'm on horseback. It feels like the whole torso is gently embracing, gathering, and holding that upper abdominal region. Like it's the center of the ball. Now all I have to do is turn. Most people find it pretty easy to turn at the waist. If you didn't, it would mean that it's a very important range of motion to explore. And it might say something about the quality of the chi in the stomach and spleen, or even the liver channels. But I can't turn at the waist. It would imply that chi and perhaps blood are stagnant and not moving freely, leading to restriction in the soft tissue, inhibition. So I'm not forcing the range of motion, and my weight's very even on my feet, even toe to heel, even left to right. You can see as I sit down in this slightly wider, deeper stance, my legs form a nice rounded arch. Nice round, full arch. I'm not pushing my knees apart, but I'm not letting them fall in. That happens mostly because of what's happening with the angle of the pelvis. As the base of the spine and the back of the pelvis sink towards the floor, it pops this arch open, makes a very round, stable shape, and it leads my weight right down smoothly into the floor. I also tend to feel like I'm working my thighs a bit, but that's going to help stimulate stomach and spleen channels, as long as they're not too rigid. Jumping ahead of myself a little bit. Now, as I just do this turn, I may again feel like the ribs are asymmetrical, not just because of the twisting, but that the twisting creates a little lift, right? And depression, right? The ribs lift or elevate on one side, and on the side I'm turning toward, they get pressed down a little bit. That's a very common theme, a common thing I want to feel in stomach spleen exercises. This is another way of achieving it without the asymmetrical arm motion. So just holding this posture is beneficial to the stomach and spleen, as is turning. We talked a little bit about that central axis with the arm crossing exercise. And this also emphasizes not just the stomach and spleen, the center, but that central axis, so the relationship between the kidney and the heart. The stomach and spleen are sometimes said to mediate that relationship between the deepest expression of the body and its most fundamental and its most complex, the heart. Because the heart includes the mind as well. It's the highest expression of complexity in the body. And it's like I'm twisting around that central axis, right? The axis mundi, the world axis that connects the world to the sky, the earth to the sky. Clear light chi rises up, in this case, thinking about the spleen chi in particular. Heavy turbid chi sinks down. Lower body feels full, heavy, but pleasantly heavy. Upper body feels light and free, but not completely empty. So another expression of the stomach and spleen chi, yin and yang. I'm just rotating very freely around that axis, helping the communication between upper and lower. Strengthening our awareness of the middle. Now, if I place one hand on top of the other, we've seen this position before, instead of reversing the hands, immediately I'm going to do a twist, and then flip them over, back to holding the ball, and twist to the other side. You can see I'm not twisting so far as it starts to pull my knee in. My thighs are nice and stable. My shoulders aren't pulling forward into the twist, but sinking down. My head and neck feel nice and neutral. Which hand is on top is not absolutely vital in the beginning. Just feeling that rounded shape right here, like an embrace, like I was embracing, holding somebody. And so the hand's not too close, not stretched out too far. Rounded, soft, and sinking. Still feel like I'm catching one hand around navel height, the other hand around that lower chest center, towards the lower chest. Right? So I'm catching the whole upper abdominal region, or embracing it. You will notice that when I do it, my upper hand seems to point the way. And this is going to be useful in feeling other things. Not that I can't feel anything, right? If I do it in this direction, and we see that kind of movement in different kinds of exercises for the stomach and spleen, there'll be some advantages in having the upper hand, those fingers pointing the direction I'm turning. Again, you see the same transition where the lower hand comes to the outside of the upper hand. Changed position. So that's been very consistent. If I try to bring the lower hand up through the inside, it tends to lift and tighten my shoulders. It's much more difficult to do in a way that feels smooth and relaxed. Another idea I want to look at is weight shifting. So if I just shift my weight initially side to side, as my weight comes to my left leg, it's even toe to heel still. I'm not letting my foot roll out or back or forward onto the toes, so inside, outside, front, back, evenly weighted. Even as the weight comes off my left leg, it's still whatever is left feels evenly weighted. I'm not shifting 100% of my weight, as much as I comfortably can, while leaving this leg feeling still firm and rooted on the floor. And you can see the arch of my legs is maintained. Right? This leg is a little straighter than it was before, but my knee isn't falling in. My knee is in a line approximately between my hip and ankle, not falling inward to break that line. And I can feel this, right, again, pulling on the spleen and stomach channels, through the thigh, up through the front hip, groin region, into the abdomen, exerting a little influence on the abdomen and the channels there. Again, it's a nice yin-yang balance, right? One side full, that's yin, the other side light, that's yang, and then it reverses. And stomach and spleen are associated with the action of ground or soil. And while it might not seem obvious at first, ground is the fulcrum, the middle point. That's easy to see. The harder image maybe is that because it's the center, because it acts as a fulcrum, it's all about exchanges between yin and yang, alternations. So stomach spleen exercises typically show this kind of clear yin-yang alternation. I can use my embracing position. And that should make it feel even more clear what's happening in my upper abdomen. And how the weight shift influences subtly, gently, that region. Overall, I feel the chi gently collect in this area. What does that feel like? It feels like a little warmth or a little fullness, right? Not uncomfortable fullness, like I've eaten too much. The sense of gentle pressure, activation. Right? The area feels full and alive. If I go back, one hand over the other, I can add the weight shift now. all these ranges of motion add up to have slightly more effect on this region, on the stomach and organ systems in general, internally, on the channels, which are seen in Chinese medicine as less deep than the organ systems. The organ systems and their functions are the deepest expression of the body's physiology. The channels which influence them are a little bit closer to the surface, so to speak, but still deep to the muscles and tendons and the sort of nuts and bolts mechanical work of the body. Now I can change hands and turn back without shifting the weight, and then shift. It just gives me a slightly different arrangement of movements, which is going to feel different. Anything that feels different is going to have a slightly different function. It's still working in the same general principles, actions in the body. I should be able to feel things a little differently when I arrange them differently. And if this starts to seem like too much choreography, leave it for later. No rush to getting to all these variations. Coming back to the center.